Well, good morning for a second time. It is now, I believe, 9:32. So I'd like to call the August 15th meeting of the Council of Mayors Executive Committee to order. I want to welcome everyone back to the old post office for this meeting of the Council of Mayors Executive Committee. Before we get started, I would like to quickly review some logistics. For those in the room, the closest restrooms are straight out the back door to the left of the reception desk. If you're in the room and you haven't already, please be sure to complete the sign-in sheet out in the hallway. Members of the audience that want to make a public comment later on in the agenda should fill out the public comment card and hand that card to Terry Dixon or another CMAP staff member in the room. This meeting is being broadcast on Zoom and is being recorded. John, you can confirm that the meeting has begun. Okay. In order for the online to hear what is being said in this room, it is critical that we all use our microphones. The button on the mic turns it on or off. It also remains a best practice to continue to identify yourself when making a motion, a second, a comment, or asking a question. For those participating via Zoom, please keep your microphones muted unless you are called upon to speak. When appropriate in the agenda, I will request comments from those online, and you can indicate your desire to speak via the chat box or by using the raised hands function. Staff monitoring the Zoom will recognize you when it is your turn to speak. With that, let's get started with self-introductions by members here at the table. I am Mayor Jeff Schalke from Batavia. I am the chairman of the committee. To my left is...
Good morning. My name is Leon Rockingham, Mayor of the City of North Chicago, Lake County.
Aaron Alaman, CMAP.
Mike Einhorn, South Council.
George Van Dusen, Northwest.
Mary Warner, Village of Worth, Southwest Conference.
Dave Brady, Village of Bedford Park, Southwest Council.
Joe Marquez, Mayor of the City of Darien.
Aaron Darch, Barrington, Northwest Council.
Mayor Glenn Ryback, Village of Wadsworth, Lake County.
Terry Dixon, CMAP.
Okay. With that, we will start today. Oh, we did that. Thank you. And we have the necessary quorum of members to continue the meeting. Great. If any voting members qualified to participate remotely, we don't need that. Okay. I'd also like to ask everyone also present in the room to identify themselves. Please state your name and the agency you represent, if any. Let's start with
Good morning. Amy with CMAP.
Eric Chernoto, Northwest Council of Mayors.
Brian Larson, North Shore Council of Mayors.
Heidi Lichtenberger, Kane Kendall, Council of Mayors.
Jessica Abdelnour, Kane Kendall, Council of Mayors.
Mary Hardigan, Kane Kendall, Council of Mayors.
Mike Clemens, Lake County Council of Mayors.
Joe Serdam, Lake County Council of Mayors.
Drew Duffin, McHenry County Council of Mayors.
Neil James, Metropolitan Mayors Caucus.
Mary Weber, CMAP.
Brittany Mattias, Southwest Conference of Mayors.
Okay, we've identified everybody in the room, so thank you all for coming and participating. According to the agenda that I was handed, this next item is the approval of the minutes of the last meeting. Could somebody care to make a motion for that?
Motion for that.
Second.
Motion and second. Can we just do a voice vote? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Seeing none, I do have okay, we did that. Yeah, okay, I see it. All right. Well, our first one is going to be the CMAP update by our esteemed chairperson, Erin Allman.
Well, good morning again. Thank you so much. I know that this meeting is a little bit out of the schedule, out of the norm for you all, but we do have a very important topic that we want to hear your feedback from today. But first, let me start by welcoming Mayor Marquez and his contribution to this committee and recognizing that he's new to the committee, but not new to the region or regional issues. We welcome your feedback and insights on all of the work that we do here at CMAP. Just a few remarks from me before we get into it is really the plan of action for regional transit or our PART program is that I have been out meeting with the counties, the county chairs, the county transportation chairs. I've been meeting with legislative leadership on the House and Senate side. I've also been meeting with the Council of Mayors and Councils of Governments and many of you in different shapes and forms. But the reason for this all is because this plan is getting towards the completion line here. We expect to have a full draft of recommendations for the General Assembly in September, which will all go to you as well. And there are representatives on this committee that roll up into both our board and MPO policy committee, and we will be asking them for the approval to release this report to the General Assembly in October is our target. And so we want to make sure that the region's mayors has the full opportunity to contribute to the ideas, the recommendations, the policy policy objectives that we have put forth in this report. I've also been meeting with the governor's office as well, the deputy governors over the infrastructure and the economy areas, as well as some of their budget staff, to really make sure, again, that we've socialized these ideas. When you're talking about filling funding gaps, I think we are left with a lot of solutions that are tough. And so my expectation isn't that 100% everybody agrees with 100% of the recommendations that are in this report, but that we have fully vetted and as a region have come to consensus that there are some things that need to happen in order for us to fill this this fiscal cliff that's impending at our transit agencies. And as I've heard loud and clear from the General Assembly is that, going and asking for $750 million without presenting some reforms is not going to be an acceptable solution. So that's really where, again, the rubber meets the road on this report. So today I'll ask that that if you have thoughts, ideas, that you do speak up and you share them with us, that you share them with your representatives to the CMAP board, whether it's Mayor Darch or not here today, but Mayor Grasso, Mayor Schilke, who's on the MPO policy committee as well, that they're hearing your input and feedback. So that's all I wanted to touch on this morning. I know that that's our top priority right now. So I'm happy to answer questions on anything else that might be of interest to you all locally, but you'll see me again. You'll see me at the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus Executive Committee talking about the same thing. I want to make sure that we're engaging as many stakeholders as we can throughout this process.
Any questions of Erin at the moment? Okay. We will then move to the Plan of Action for Regional Transit by Laura Wilkins.
Good morning. As Erin was just saying, I'm excited to talk to you about where we are with the report currently. I'm reading a draft pieces right now while we're sitting here today, excited for this to move forward. Again, our goal, as Erin mentioned, is this going to our board and MPO on September 6th, so that by the 13th meeting, they have been able to review that draft. So again, we're in the home stretch here and excited to move this forward. So we talked last time about where we were looking at the financial pieces. And I want to kind of speak to you today about where we're going with the funding packages. Additionally, talk a little about the governance and where we're moving in that space. So if you will be so kind, I'll kind of skim over the beginning, but I think it's an important piece. Next slide. And that's the system improvement. So before we start talking about what we're funding, I think it's critically important to make sure that we understand when we're looking at these funding packages that we're not just talking about going back to the service, the transit service that we had pre-COVID, but we're talking about expanding the service to our region, as well as adapting the service to our current mobility system. So again, when we think about these funding packages, I want these pieces to be in your mind as well, because we're talking about improving our bus system. We're talking about making a fully integrated fare system and making sure that's affordable for our region. We're talking about improving safety, security, and cleanliness on our transit system. We're talking about system accessibility, whether that's paratransit or demand response services, that we're talking about people being able to move throughout the system and age in place in our region. We also think service frequency is important. Again, if it's not coming when and where you want it, then the service isn't going to be convenient for you and you're not going to use it. So that's very critical to the whole success of the system. Looking at Metro's transition to regional rail and how that's going to be important is something that we talk about in our funding packages. And additionally, being able to make decisions for our region so that we have accessibility to new development as we think about kind of making that be part of the system or part of the process from the beginning instead of at the end. So there's a lot of recommendations in this report to help the system move forward, but probably none as critical as making sure that we have funding in order for those improvements to move forward. So how to pay for it. The next slide. As we started to approach this, so we're again wanted to make sure that we kind of touched base on how we were approaching this process. One is that we knew the transit system itself needs to be part of the solution. There needs to be efficiencies, savings, as well as fare increases as we start to move forward, looking at different funding options. We also know there needs to be a more robust state support, and I'll talk a little bit about that today. We also want it to be stable and dedicated funding for paratransit. Again, those kind of go together, and we'll discuss that today, but that's a critical need in our area. We need to look at the sales tax base. We also know, again, a lot of times we talk about that here in CMAP, even when we're not talking about transit, is that transportation dollars be used for transportation investments. And so we need to look at those solutions as well. And that we knew that these funding sources needed to be equitable. Next slide. So as I mentioned, I think it's key as we start thinking about these funding packages that we have an understanding of what's happening to paratransit in our region. So paratransit is required, federally required of our system. It is for all the revenues that come to the transit system, it is kind of taken off of the top. So as those costs continue to grow and those needs of our region continue to grow, it will actually degrade the amount of service that we're able to provide on the other service boards. So we know this is a critical piece of the funding package, and it's one that we want to take care of for our region, and again, federally required to, but it's important for our communities. Next slide. So as we looked at this, you'll see that not only is it important for paratransit, which I'll just note that the state pays for a significant portion of paratransit downstate, and many other states pay for their paratransit service, while we here in the RTA region pay 100% of that service ourselves. It's also critical to note that we probably have one of the lower funding amounts from the state for our transit system. And so I think it allows us to have more conversations about state support as we move forward. So where did we go from here? We decided that with all of this information, next slide, we would approach this by kind of putting 3 scenario packages together. Again, this is what we do best right here at CMAP, is looking at different scenarios and seeing how they apply to our region. So there are certain baseline things that we know that we want. Again, with paratransit, state support for reduced fare mandates that they have asked us to cover, as well as about $30 million in sales tax, a fee for collecting the sales tax. So those are kind of baseline things we knew that the state, we're going to ask for the state. But we have 3 packages, kind of the minimum viable. We've been talking about the 700 million number as we've been going along. That's really just to go back to where we were and to kind of limp along. Meaningful investment where we have some of those improvements, and transformational change, where we really accept all of those improvements that we've been discussing and looking at what that's cost. So let me talk about that one. Next slide. Transformational investment. So you'll see on the right-hand side that we have the list of the different improvements that we have been talking about. And you can see on the left-hand side what sort of revenue sources we would need to look at in order to achieve that. There's a lot of things in there. Some of them can be mixed and matched as we look forward, but we think that these are really a good sense, gives you a good sense of what it will need for us to achieve these goals. So I'm going to kind of hit on these kind of quickly, and we can pick them apart as we need to as we have discussions. But again, you'll see the first three baseline actions are the ones that I mentioned, that we're going to be asking for state support for paratransit, the reduced fare mandates, and the service fee. We also think there is a system contribution from itself. As I said, we want the transit system to be part of the solution. So that's either containing cross growth or increasing fees. The next selection of sources, and this is important to us, is that if we're going to recommend things, we want this to be something that's durable. We don't want to be back at this conversation in 4 to 5 years because of declining resources. So the important piece in there and is in this section is that these are durable sources and that are things that we can gain soon. So some of these things, again, we have the additional support for paratransit in here. We have commercial parking taxes, down in downtown area of Chicago, and vehicle registration surcharge. The first two in that list are those conversations we've been having before about sales tax revenues and about how it's important that we move towards services versus goods. And so we are continuing that conversation in this package. And then we also have started to explore the option of some toll funding being able to be used for transit service, especially where there is transit service in those areas. And so that is something that we're exploring as well. So the next two slides are kind of your step down from each of these, right? So the next slide is meaningful change. And that's about 1 billion versus the first one that I showed is about 1.5 billion. And again, that gets us all of the system improvements. So if you go to $1 billion, you see that you actually still have some system improvements, but they're reduced. And you still have a significant amount of funding sources that we still need to achieve. So as we start to move forward, I think that the way that we're going to be framing this is that transformational investment is what we would want to achieve because those are getting the system improvements. And then we can continue to have discussions about kind of the scenario planning of which of these revenue sources, which of these improvements people would like to see as we move to the General Assembly. The last slide is minimum viable. And I think we are not even going to include this in the report because we don't think it gets us what we need or what we want and gets us back right to where we were in 2019, which doesn't meet the principles that we've been moving forward. But I think it's important to note that when we talk about just covering the gap, you still see a lot of revenue needs on the left side. So even that is not going to be easy, but is important that we continue to have these difficult conversations as we look towards funding the transit system. The last slide in this segment of conversation, and then we'll move to discussion and governance. But I think it's also important to note that we do not have blinders on that a lot of the system improvements that we're recommending have a capital component to them. So we've been talking about operating, but we know that these include, fare integration machines, that they include sidings on regional rail, things like that, that they are not without a capital cost. And so we want to make sure that if we're discussing this, we're also bringing the full cost to light. And this is above and beyond our state of good repair needs right now. So again, not an easy situation to be in, but we also want to make sure that people understand that these all have costs.
Look,
Yeah.
before we roll into governance,
Yeah, it's going to go to discussion. So good. Open discussion. Next slide. Go ahead. Go ahead. No, go. Yeah. Oh, I was going to pause.
Just asking for a pause.
Pause. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a lot to have shared with you, and know that's kind of where we're going, but would love to get thoughts or input about what I've shown either in the transformational investment or meaningful change packages. Yeah, Mary, no.
Go back one slide. Oh, good. Yeah.
I guess I don't see a lot of specifics for capital investment.
Right. So here, yeah,
Seems
if you want, Yeah, if you'd like to see the breakdown and what the 200 or 400 million, what we're actually doing, we can share that with you. I didn't put that all on the slide of what we're assuming.
Yeah, and most of these capital investment needs are just to facilitate the improvements that we're talking about. So if everyone moved to one fair system and we had a full integrated Ventra system where you were paying one monthly fee and not worrying about your PACE monthly fee and your CTA monthly fee or your Metro monthly fee, that there's some technology, hard technology capital costs that go along with that. Or if we wanted all of our stations to be accessible in new and different ways, that there's some capital costs associated with those.
Regional rail is in order for Metro to move between suburbs versus just the system they're on. We're probably going to need some sidings due to freight rail interference. So we have some capital costs associated with what regional rail would look like. An example.
Have the people from the CREATE program been advised of all this?
Mm-hmm. This is, and I will say this is more in the CREATE 2.0 area. I mean, we're trying to, within the CREATE program now, reduce those intersections. So this would be above and beyond what they're trying to do, but it would, they don't conflict, but it's not included in the current CREATE program.
Other comments or questions?
Would you, yeah, microphone, thank you.
It's hard. It's funny to me when the three things have been what we want, how we govern, how we pay for it. Yeah. And starting at how we pay for it before. So when it's easier for me to think of, okay, this is what we're talking about. How we are going to govern it and doing this one last. So in terms of commenting now we're okay, but what are we talking about? I know because I've been looking at it, but I'm just saying to just say, okay, what do you guys think about these different things when we don't know what we're funding with this?
Yeah, so go back to the transformational investment slide, because I think that one's kind of key, because what we've been trying to do is the pieces of the system we want is in the what we could get. So that's what we have drawn through. Those things are what is on the right-hand side. Because I think that's a good help clarifier for us of how we talk about this, because that is exactly what we want to do is say, you've said in the system we want areas, this is what you want. And if you want all of those things, it's going to have to be this package. If you're, if you want to lose a few of these other pieces, it's the next package. And I think for us, I know that's an important conversation when we go to Springfield as well, because there's a lot of times it's like, great, this is what we want, but let's not talk about the cost of it. And so I think we've been trying to really make sure that we denote that if these are the improvements we want to the system, you have to pay for those improvements. And so we want to make sure that we're matching the two of them together.
And even putting those side by side, system 1, system 2, system 3. So it's all,
Yeah,
so
no, that's helpful.
Menu, and you know what you're not doing and what you are doing, and then talk about how you pay for it.
No, that's helpful.
There other comments or questions? I have a couple, so
right ahead.
I've had the experience in the last few weeks in negotiations with a electric car manufacturer who's trying to put a showroom in my town. It's been very interesting conversation, and I brought up the fact that electric cars right now aren't paying the motor fuel tax in Illinois. And he obviously is not supportive of that idea, that he thinks that the electric car would just run on any street. And I asked him, well, what's the difference of a gas car versus an electric car? They're both doing the same thing to the road, and we're not doing anything. So I didn't really get a good answer from him. And he probably is not coming to my town now because I gave him these questions about what are you going to do? But I mean, I don't see any conversation in what we're talking about here about, are we going to go after the legislature to enact some kind of a MFT on electric vehicles?
So we have been talking, and I think that's one of the things that you'll see here. Do we have a VMT fee on here? It's not. So in the report, we do talk about the need to transition to a vehicle miles traveled fee, an equivalent of what you're seeing through the motor fuel tax here, but that's on the horizon and probably a little bit farther out. And so the near term need not too far out, but not 2050, but probably, in the next 5 years, but the near term need is in the next year that we need to think about the resources or the tools that we have today. And the motor fuel tax is the tool that we have today, even though it's diminishing, but that we would need to think about building in policies related to using vehicle mile traveled fees to help support roads in general, but the roads that also facilitate bus movement and transit movement at the same time. So there is some discussion, Mayor, about that in the report.
Can you explain how that actually works? What's the mechanics of that? Because I can't mentally wrap my head around how you're going to know how many miles I travel in my car and how that gets translated into money going from this point to that point. And I just don't, I'm missing something here, and I would like to have somebody explain that to me.
We can certainly bring this back for a larger discussion, but I'll just say in brief, we've seen states like Oregon who has gone from sort of a pilot where it's on paper showing you how, the fees would be collected to actually collecting fees. Utah in the next year is also, their legislature has said that because they care about their open spaces and their environment, that they need to be thinking about vehicle miles traveled fees.
But those are also extremely small population bases in both of those states.
They are.
There's
So
not a lot of people live in either one.
Minnesota is got funding for a pilot this last year, as well as the state of Kansas. And so we're seeing some states pick up these tools, these pilots that they're building. In the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the bipartisan infrastructure law, there's also a request that USDOT set up a national pilot as well. But essentially the states that have tested this across the country are looking at a couple different options. You could have a very low tech way of doing this, where when you go get your when you go in for your emissions testing, right, they would look at your dashboard, they would see the miles you've traveled. Are they able to tell if it's in state or out of state? Not really. That's why that national pilot is really important, because as we're thinking about where people travel and how freight moves across the region, but that, Allstate has that safe driving program, and I'm not promoting it, but you get a dongle, they attach it to your car, and you can tell if your teenager is driving the speed limit and you get a better rate, right? That sort of technology is the sort of plug-in technology. In older vehicles are things that they have developed. In newer vehicles, the electric vehicles, they are able to sort of tell where you are and all of that sort of technology, your GPS in your car. And so those are the ways that they can send signals back to different tools or operators or back-end operators. So different states are doing a number of different things. I know some states even have take a photo of your dashboard, odometer. So again, there are a whole host of options. I don't think that the dust is settled on how this has to happen. And I think, again, that national pilot's going to be really important to all of the states adopting this fair and equitably.
I can see a lot of flaws in that personally, just because, first of all, the big brother issue is one thing. And second of all, what does it cost to do all this? Is it greater than or less than the cost, the money saved?
Yep, and we can send you, they've looked at administrative fees and some of the challenges, because the gas tax is collected at the point of entry into the United States, as opposed to sort of has to be done at the back end. But we can certainly get into that, and we can share a little bit more if you're specifically interested in some of those lessons learned.
Well, my second question is, in reading this over, and I appreciate the good efforts that have been made, and I think it's a worthy cause, and there's a lot of good stuff into it. One thing that seems to be missing, however, is what is the boundaries of the RTA sales tax? And I say that because I now hear that Metro wants to take a train out to Rockford, and there's no sales tax out there as far as that I know. And more interestingly, we have our little situation going in Kendall County. And I was to a meeting last week with a newly elected mayor in Kendall County. And the first thing he does is get up and announce to all the rest of us at the meeting that he's run for office because he's all about getting a train into Kendall County. So then I go down, not recently, but the last time there was an election in Kendall County, I go down there and there's candidates running for the county board, and their campaign platform on their poster says, I'm going to fight to keep the RTA sales tax out of Kendall County. So, I don't know where all this is going, but there seems to be some differences of opinion here that this report doesn't seem to want to talk about. I guess I would say it that way.
Either way. Okay, so I will say this report right now, right, is on the 6 counties within the RTA sales tax region. So that is because we need to talk about that service. I will talk about as we get into governance that as the state has more funding in the game and starts to be part of this, we need to make them part of this conversation. And I think that that's part of what's happened before, right? Is the state is actually funding the Metro service to Rockford out of their inner city passenger. So it's not coming out of the sales tax, which is good from that space of like, those 6 counties are in this sales tax region are getting the service. However, to your point, if we are talking about service within the region, it really should be working throughout this transit system. And we would like to have the state at the table so they continue to be partner as we start to make further decisions about how service is going to be expanded, extended, et cetera, so that it's not separate from these discussions. So we really start to talk about that more and bringing the state into the governance conversation so that they're a partner for us.
Well, I would really describe that as kind of a landmine in the ground here, because I mean, you're suddenly going to have people saying, well, I need the train in my town, but I'm not paying the sales tax. And that's going to be a real sticky wicket. I mean, that's going to be something that I don't know how easy it's going to be the RTA to get over that one.
Yeah, we've definitely been hearing as we've been out in the region that this is a concern. And so we'll continue to
I would hope that the final report that's done would bring that in written form to the conversation so that the world knows that you're thinking about it at least, and that people can't run around and say, well, I'm getting the RTA in here, but I'm not paying the sales tax. That's a very strong wall to climb over.
Okay.
Anybody else got any? Karen, you want to throw something out?
So many thoughts are in my head, but I'm saving more for our meeting next week for the CMAP board. I'm trying to read through all of it because there's some very fundamental things that we've talked about a little bit with folks who own vehicles, and a lot of these are falling on them. And, you know, we talked about, is there a calculation that says we're trying to get X number of people off the road by making parking more expensive or vehicle registration? So the folks who are paying for it are the ones who aren't using it in one sense, or maybe they're doing both. Maybe they use transit and use a vehicle.
Well, I think it is a little bit of both too. I mean, I think it's not only, you know, do we want to have a transit system as an option for folks, but if we don't have a transit system as an option for folks, people will have no choice but to drive even more than they already do today. And so I think, again, it's thinking about this multimodal nature of our transportation system and how the interconnectedness happens. But I hear your concern, but it's sort of a difficult thing to describe.
And I think as the county people raise the question of taking any motor fuel tax funds from roads to transit where there isn't enough highway funding at this point is certainly going to be.
Yeah, we had some specific follow-ups with DuPage and with Cook earlier this week. And so again, I think any of the increases to the motor fuel tax or to the vehicle registration fees are on top of and not taking away from the current was their concern.
So we addressed that issue with them that we have not put forward anything that would degrade what currently has from the motor fuel tax.
Other questions?
Well, then we'll move to governance. If we think taxes are fun, let's talk about governance structures. Next slide. So let's go back. Again, I want to talk next slide. A little bit how we got here. So again, the legislation asks us to look at governance structures. And in the report, you will see that we talk a lot about the system improvements and how they can be impacted or improved, currently run through governance structures. So how, if we talk about regional buses, how does that actually marry with some governance issues? So we started with really like, what is the problem we're trying to solve? So we didn't go straight to structures and straight to seats and assignments and things like that. We really want to say, what is the issue that we are trying to solve for when we look at our governance structure. And just to remember, they did this in 2008, they did it in 2014, we're doing it again. So this is not the first conversation that we've had about how we have 4 service boards that are looking at our transit system right now. We also have brought on ENO Center for Transportation, kind of a policy think tank in the transit space. So they have worked both nationally and internationally with other transit systems to try to help us think about these issues. So they have done some case studies research that are posted on our website currently. We've also did surveys. We've also collected information from CTA, Metro, and PACE's surveys to try to have bring everything together. We started to look at recommendations, and right now we are refining those recommendations to bring to the board. So I want to talk to you a little bit what we've heard. Next slide. So the things that we have heard as we've been doing these surveys and going throughout the region is that people would like to see us align our funding better with our regional goals for transit, as Aaron was saying, it's fully multimodal system. That there are certain things that people feel strongly about that should be centralized, like fair policy and financial stewardship, that we need to have more regional perspectives on the regional governing board, and we can talk a little bit more of that in a minute. That it's really critical to have avenues for local input that, as you guys have mentioned, as we've heard throughout the region, people that are closest to the ridership want to make sure that they have a voice so that that is getting to the full regional board, as well as, again, we need to revisit the 50% recovery ratio, that does not allow us to have innovation within our system. Next slide. So we've come down to 4 possible models to consider. 2 of them strengthen a regional entity, so an RTA-ish entity. So it would be RTA with some changes to the structure there, but essentially a regional entity, and you keep the service boards. And 2, where we integrate the service boards into one regional agency. Next slide. So just to kind of ground us, what we currently have, right? So right now you have an RTA board, and they have executive, and they're responsible for certain elements of financial stewardship, certain elements of capital funding, and some regional strategic planning. And then each of the 3 service boards have their board, their executive, and then they do transit operating and service planning, and some capital planning. So next slide, the 2 where we keep the RTA entity, you'll see that fair policy is now in the responsibility of the full regional board. So if we're talking about integrated service system, that would happen at the RTA level, not at each of the 3 board levels. So an example of this right now is that CTA has the Ventra contract. Metro and PACE have to work through CTA system to use any of that. And this option, things like that would be at the RTA. They would own that system. Next slide. So we take it a step further. A regional network manager, again, ENO's been working with us to kind of flesh this one out. This is a system that Berlin currently uses. How does that actually mean anything here? How do we make it CMAP, Chicago landify it? But we actually move capital planning and capital prioritization into the regional entity, as well as funding allocation and funding decisions would move into that regional entity. Next slide. The next 2 I'm going to show are options where, again, the boards of the 3 service boards go away. And in this one, you have their RTA regional entity. And then each of the service boards act more like divisions. And so there's a Metro, CTA, PACE, and then paratransit on-demand services, which matches actually with what we've heard from the counties, is they really want to focus on paratransit itself. So that is mirrored here. And then the last option is if you were to start from scratch and none of these things had existed, how would you set this up? And that's, you would have a regional entity where you would have modal divisions, which again, we've seen in different places. And that is one option. I will say that we've seen New York has gone to kind of a number 3, number 4 area. And so we're looking at somewhat of the pros and cons of what they've done in that area. San Diego has gone to more of the option 2. So again, kind of what are the pros and cons of what they've gone through? And again, throughout the international sphere too, of what are the pros and cons of each of these. What we'd like to do in the next step is really build each of these out and see what pros and cons. Right now we're kind of moving in the direction of 2 and 3 are both options that get us a lot of the improvements and have ability to address some of the governance issues that we've been faced in our problem statement. And so we're kind of heading in the direction of fleshing out 2 and 3 into a deeper level for the final report. Going to stop there and get comments on the options or questions on those 4 possibilities. And just as, yeah, go ahead, Mayor.
Mayor, would you mind using your, yep.
Is it on? Do you think the city of Chicago in the unified entity program would actually give up control?
Yeah, this is kind of where we're in the 2 and 3 option. That's a good question. We continue to have conversations with everybody at the city, counties, service boards. We don't want this to be a surprise to anybody getting feedback. But that is a good question.
Can you speak to the current traffic volume by way of number of riders for the various metro lines in and out of Chicago?
I don't have them memorized, but we can get them to you. But the system has rebounded to about 60% of where it was before COVID. So we anticipate, again, we continue to have some growth, but we don't see it coming back to 100%.
But I think what is going to be most telling is what is going on with the ridership for people that are coming into Ogilvie or Union Station, as opposed to what's taking place on the lakefront. And that should tell you something. You know, we're very centric around here. That's the outlier. And if you live out south, you have no way to get here. And I don't see anybody offering up any solutions to resolving that. I think there are some solutions, but I think we've, quite frankly, just avoided that. So,
well,
just saying.
And I think to that end, you know, one of the things that's challenging about the funding options is that if we just are able to achieve filling that gap, we can't serve new or existing markets that aren't currently served. And so one of the things those larger, more transformational packages of funding might do is to think about, there's a lot of freight and intermodal facilities that, you know, have jobs available. But when you think about sort of the wages and the benefits and the time and the cost of owning a car, the math just doesn't work out for folks. And so I think, again, we've got places across the region that would be well served. And we've heard from mayors and folks across the region, businesses, that they would like to have some transit access, but the way that it's not currently served today. And so how do you solve those problems, and how do you hold the transit systems accountable for that? And part of that is, like, if we are able to achieve more funding than just closing the gap, you could look to new service. I think it's sort of related to the comment about transit service out to Rockford as well, you know, is that I know that mayors across this region have asked for alternative service from the current providers and just have been told that there isn't funding to do that. And so I guess that's sort of where we're looking for, if we think that there are emerging travel demands or sheds that we should be thinking about. I think that would be helpful information for us to have.
And I think that's part of the conversation too about changing the fare box recovery ratio. Is right now we haven't been able to expand service unless we can demonstrate that there's a ridership that's going to be at a high level, at like this 50% level, and it actually hasn't allowed for innovation. And so by having that decrease and having this actually mesh with what are the regional goals for the region, where do we want more service, where do we want to have growth, then we can offer service in a better way than we've been able to do before.
All I'll say is this was discussed back in the late 90s, and the amount of expected usage was extremely high. But yet it did, you know, the thing didn't happen. And I don't think it happened for a variety of reasons. I don't think the circumstances are the same today as they were back then. But at the end of the day, if you live out south, you're not working over here. It just isn't happening unless you're driving. And then you wonder why the traffic is so bad on the Ryan. It's undeniable.
Yeah, I would like to kind of piggyback on what Mayor Einhorn just said and say, there are some things happening that I don't know if we've determined them yet, but as an example, I'll talk about myself is not myself, but Batavia. In the last 2 years, we have issued building permits for 549 new living units. It's a lot of houses. And including some senior housing, we have 1 unit of 144. And so I have when you come into Batavia, you have to file your name and address to get water, sewer, and electric. We own our own electric utility. So I have an excellent gal that runs our utility billing department. And she and I talked a while back, and I said to her, you know, when these people come in, nose around a little bit and find out where they're coming from. Where are these, you know? So her report to me last week is that the vast majority of the new residents coming into Batavia seem to be coming from one place, and we're sitting in it right now. There's this major shift of people coming out of the city into the suburban area. And what's, you know, kind of a more interesting thing about it is that we now have 6 senior living communities in Batavia, and I've got 2 more that are being approved as we speak. So I'll have 8. And the population of that number changes. Right now, it's someplace between 1,500 and 1,700 people are now living in these units. And what we are seeing is we got call and ride buses all over the place now. I mean, that's become the big thing where everybody wants the bus to come to their house, pick them up, take them to the doctor, the shopping center, or whatever. So there is a major refocus, you know, of the bus service in the suburbs in my town, and I'll say Geneva and St. Charles to the north of me are having kind of the same thing. And we're having some very unique changes in what kind of services we need and want. And this bus thing seems to be really a high-end thing. Jokingly, I had Culver's Restaurant show up in Batavia and say they wanted to have a meeting. So they show up, and my city administrator and I met with them. And the first question out of their mouth was, how many senior living units do you have in Batavia? And I said, well, we have 6, it's going to be 8. And the gal that owns the franchise, it's now is just opened in Batavia, says, well, I'm coming to this town because our big part of our business is senior citizens like our restaurant. So this senior thing and this moving of people from Chicago out to the suburbs seem to be 2 big factors. And I don't know if I'm reading this over, and Aaron's been real kind to me to send me all this stuff. I mean, I think it's a great report, but I don't know if you guys are digging into those factors that are really in the face of us out there in the suburbs right at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've been hearing a lot about that as we've been out in the region too, and making sure that we account for it in the report, because I think, like I said, we were talking in the beginning, as the paratransit and the on-demand services are going to be and continue to be, and that anecdote is exactly it, as we want people to be able to age in place and want to be able to get around to still be active. They're using paratransit and on-demand services. And as those grow, we need to look at full services, right? We need to look at, if you've got enough ridership, that they should be buses and not on demand. I mean, our transit system will not be able to give Ubers and Lyfts with on-demand services to everybody throughout the region. So we need to be thinking about, how do we use those effectively? How do we consolidate? We've already seen consolidation in Lake and McHenry. We'd like to see that throughout the region. We've talked a lot, the county chairs talk about that as well, that's something that they'd like to see us improve upon. So I think that having the right balance of full service, on-demand services, and paratransit, and how we're funding those is going to be key. I think that not only aging in place, but also employment movement, right? If we're talking about growth in Will County, but a significant amount of employees are coming from South Cook or the south part of the city, or what is the service that we have for employers to be able to move throughout the region? And I think we saw that before COVID, right? 60% of our workers were moving between counties for their jobs. So we want to make sure that we're really looking at each of those options in here and being able to have a robust enough transit system to respond to those needs.
Anybody else want to throw a comment into this conversation? I think this has been very fruitful. I really appreciate the opportunity to have this dialogue. I think it's right in the face of what we're dealing with. And there is some significant changes happening in this region that I think CMAP, I'm glad you're here to kind of see them and identify them and help us kind of plan for the future as to work for them. I think Mayor Einhorn in this area down there, they've got some significant issues that need to be addressed down there. And I would hope that the state legislature, for one, would step up and start creating some new types of things that need to be done, but we'll see.
Yeah, if you want to go to the next slide, thank you, because I think that's exactly where we are right now. Is we have been trying to make sure that we are being as transparent and open as possible as we're looking at so many of these different issues. I think we have about 18 white papers or presentations posted on the website. So you can pick any one of those pieces, the regional rail or bus, and read more than enough information as those are being posted on our website. We're continuing to do outreach right up to the very last moment of our submittal to the board and MPO in September. We'll additionally have more conversations after that, I'm imagining. And then we are hopeful for a final vote on approval in October. Then there's a next step after that, right? We actually deliver the report and then we begin again, right? I keep saying this is a dress rehearsal for what's going to happen after this, because while we are going to present these recommendations, that doesn't mean the General Assembly is going to pick up all of them or take them. And so I think it's important then that we move on to the next step of really we've already been having conversations with our state legislators, but it will be another round of making sure that we are providing a back and forth dialogue with our legislators after that as they move forward to enacting some of the legislation.
And I think that's really where your input, your guidance, the organizations that you all are members of that do more legislative work and lobbying work in Springfield, right, is that we are simply your friendly regional transportation and land use planners developing, I think, sort of what a suite of best practices that we can take to the General Assembly based on our research that we've been doing. But we don't lobby in Springfield, and I'll put my Mayor Bennett hat on. It's like, that's the Mayor's Caucus, and that's the ISACO, the Illinois State Counties Association, right? And so this has to have something that you can see in there for you, I think, because as your direct connections to your locally elected, state elected officials, right, they're going to need to hear from you as to why it's important that we have transit in this region that's successful, or why we need more in order for this report to have some real legs after we deliver it to the General Assembly.
Aaron, following up on that, and I'm Mark Kukler, I'm relatively new here. But when I heard, we need more funding, that makes sense to me. I understand that. But when I hear the way to get more funding is to start taxing services, it's an idea, but I don't see how a mayor is really going to get behind that. It doesn't seem politically that saying, hey, what I want to do is now start taxing, the haircut and other services because I want more RTA funding or, whatever the funding may be. I find that to be a hard ask of my constituents. I wouldn't be out there very publicly saying this is what I'm championing. So I'm not sure if that's the feedback you're looking for or not.
No, and I think that's helpful because, again, all of these choices, though, are hard. The General Assembly members that we've talked to are like, well, we just raised the gas tax, so it's going to be really hard for us to do this. Or, some feedback we got yesterday was like, unless we're in a recession and there's real pressure to look at broadening the base and reducing the sales tax rate, we're not sure how feasible this is. So what we've been asked to do is put together, what are our peer states doing? How are they funding things differently? And when we look at our neighboring states and how they've reformed their sales tax and their tax on services, we are just woefully behind. And so again, for us, it's the best policy, best practice that we're putting forth. I think, again, one of the things that we're trying to do is help make the case for why transit is so important to our region, and that we're not sort of getting into the, it must be this way or that way, but that it's going to take more than just one source of funding.
Sure. And following up on that, recently, I believe the legislature came down and said, well, we're going to give $4,500 state tax credits to electric vehicle purchases. And to me, they should be saying, well, since you're not paying a gas tax, instead of $4,500 to the consumer, we're going to give $4,500 to, some other entity that is, meets the funding.
Yeah.
And so I just don't see where the legislature doesn't seem to really care that the fact that these electric vehicles don't pay any costs of the infrastructure, and they're continuing to be subsidized. I'm not sure.
Yeah, also a good point. I think one of the things too is we've been looking at sort of the sales tax conversation and broadening the base, is that it's a statewide conversation. We've had a consultant do the math on what the benefits would be to local jurisdictions, to counties, and to the states overall financial health. And I think we could share that information with you. It's pretty compelling in terms of if we were to modernize our sales tax and our services structure to be more oriented like our peers. There's a good story to be told there in terms of what you all and what your constituents could have by modernizing that. So again, I'm not saying it's the answer that's going to happen, but I do sincerely appreciate the feedback, Mayor.
Can I make a comment in regards to that? It's not a homogeneous area by any stretch. You're out where I'm at, you're dealing with Indiana. You go to Joliet, you're not dealing with Indiana. You go to your town, Barrington. You're not,
Wisconsin.
Yeah, but I mean, you're still a ways from Wisconsin, where I'm literally on the state line. And our competition with them is a problem. So you start adding more taxes on this side of the line. Where do you think the people are going to go? They're going that way. So what may be good for the region in some people's eyes are not good at the local level. So I'm going to wind up getting penalized, or my town is, and my area is going to get penalized when we start raising things, and nobody really cares. Because you have to look at the big picture, but the big picture does not always work. And that's a problem. Nobody else in this room has got that kind of interference.
So I think
South Council.
You may recall when Cook County had the sweetened beverage tax, I believe I was the only mayor that actually went down and testified against it. And I had other people telling me, holy crap, you're crazy because you're going to blackball yourself with, the president. I was able to prove that in my community, which is less than 15 minutes from Will County and Indiana, I literally had residents for 2 weeks giving me their retail sales tax receipts because they were leaving the Village of Worth and they were going to, Indiana has zero tax on food, zero. I literally drove myself to a Myers in Will County and spent a half an hour looking in the parking lot at all the little vehicle stickers on the cars that were from Worth and Chicago Ridge and Oak Lawn. And they were all shopping in Will County. And they were not just buying their sweetened beverages, they were buying everything. Oh, and guess what? Meijer also has discount gas. Oh, these people thought this was awesome. So it didn't take very long to convince the majority of the Cook County commissioners that the sweetened beverage tax was not necessarily the best way to go. But I also think, I'm not sure what your definition of modernizing sales tax is. I think in Springfield, they've been talking about a service tax for years, literally years. And there's so much pushback because, oh my gosh, now it costs more for my dry cleaning. It's going to cost more to get my hair cut. It's going to cost more to get my, and is that going to include if I have to go to a doctor, to a dentist, to a lawyer? You know, where do you stop with a service tax? Do we need to go to Springfield with more of just, we need money, we need money, we need money? Is there any talk about, you mentioned briefly consolidation. I can tell you in the village of Worth, when we built our metro station like 25 years ago when I was a commuter, we built 4 parking lots. I just sold one with permission from Metra because we had almost 500 parking spots. And right now today, we use about 60 out of 500. There's no way it's ever going to go back to 60% that I can foresee. And I believe it's the same, the Southwest Service Line. You know, we have a train station like every 3 minutes. There's empty parking lots in Palos. There's empty parking lots in Chicago Ridge. There's empty parking spaces in Oak Lawn. You know, are the state legislators going to look at us and say, what the heck? Do you need all of these services? Do you need all of these train stations? How, you know, and I know from my perspective, my metro lots that I have to maintain now cost me money every week. You know, every time I have to cut the grass, every time I have to plow the snow, those 60 people who park do not come up with anywhere near enough revenue for me. I now need probably about $200,000 to repave the one parking lot that's being utilized. So I'm not sure if all of our conversations should revolve around more money, more money, more money. And is that going to come from the people who really can't afford it? You know, we went to one of those pay-as-you-go systems a couple years ago. You know, when I was a commuter, you took your little dollar bill and you folded it up and you put it in a little slot. Well, it doesn't work anymore. Everybody wants to use their cell phone. A couple weeks ago, I got a letter in the mail that the 3 pay-as-you-go things in my parking lots, they're obsolete. They're not even going to maintain them anymore. It's going to cost me over $30,000 to replace them. Does that make sense?
The Metro Electric has got the Metro Electric parking lots are vacant.
Yeah.
Look at Park Forest Richland Park. They got a huge lot, nobody in it. University Park, nobody in it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Investments, no riders.
And I think I appreciate a lot of your comments, because I think we are in a situation where we're having these conversations and debating this and hearing this, right? And so I think it's kind of important for me as we approach this, is that our goal is to get riders back on transit. And so what is it that we need to do to make that a system that is attractive?
They're working from home. They don't have to commute. I have a next door neighbor who hasn't been to her office in 2 years. I have a sister-in-law who worked for an attorney. They had 4 floors in a huge building downtown Chicago. She worked from home for 2 years. She now comes downtown 1 day a week. I'm not sure we're looking at this in the right view. Do you really think that there's that many people in Chicago still working, or do you see these vacant floors now and that these attorneys are going to be not renewing leases on, 10,000 square feet because they don't need it?
Yeah, I think it's really important, as we've done the mobility recovery work and we look at where people are moving and where we're going, that it's not necessarily, there's a lot of changes to our mobility system, and we have to be aware of that and account for that as we move forward. But we also, thinking about our long-term, right, our 2050 goals as we look at climate improvement, economic improvement, mobility improvement, it's still a critical piece of our system. And so how do we marry those two issues of our mobility system is changing because of COVID, and it's still a very critical component. It may look different, and we need to account for that. So I think, to your point, I think we think it's very important that we don't just ask for money and to say fill this gap, but it's the improvements and what are the things we need to do to change and improve the system for it to be successful, not just please give us $700 million a year from here on out, a year, right? So we need to make sure that the money that we're asking for is improving the system in a way that we want for our future. And so I think that's where we've been trying to marry the two things together. And the last piece I will say is, again, as we were talking, we understand that maybe these revenue options are not going to be where the legislature ends up going. But it is what they tasked us to do, because they came with this legislation and talked to us, is that everyone says, give me money, but nobody's helping us figure out what are the right policy decisions? What are the revenue options that make sense for equity, for climate change, for economic development? And so that they are difficult conversations to have, but that is why we wanted to put these options in front of you, options in front of the legislature. They have some other options people have put in front of us. Like, would you support this? And we're like, we're going to stay in a place where it makes sense for policy, but there's a very good chance that they will look at many other options as they actually look to funding this.
And I think it's why we've stuck to sort of more transportation related revenue sources and not sort of thought about like, what else do we tax? So when you're talking about services, and we can send you the report, we're really thinking about transportation related services. And not just sort of lawyers and, all of this stuff. Two things just to mention as you were speaking, and I think, again, I appreciate, right, that you're right. Many people from your community may not use the train. And so thinking about what that service is, where Metro has seen success is throughout the day and not at the AM and PM peaks or on Saturday service. So people going to entertainment venues from places that are more traditionally single family bedroom communities. But I'll say that, again, to Mayor Einhorn's point about the diversity of our region, is that 60% of the jobs in this region cannot be done from home. That's the manufacturing, that's the janitorial, that's the, we have our transportation logistics network here in the region getting freight offloaded and unloaded to go to other places across the country really is a huge driver, that transportation component of our economy. And so certain parts of our region do need to be served to get those folks to those jobs. I think Mayor Brady, I know that you've done some pilot work in your community for people getting off third shift. They don't have transit options to get to and from those jobs, and they don't necessarily make wages that offer them the opportunity to continue to have sort of these high wage like the white collar workers do. And so again, as we sit here, I think some of us do have those choices, but many of the people who help our economy move effectively just don't.
One kind of.
Oh, if you wouldn't mind turning on.
Yeah, hit your button.
Thank you.
One statement with the Ride to Work program that we have, it's worked well. Okay, the people utilize it. They could connect with the Chicago L system and have a ride to a work in Bedford Park, and it's subsidized. The county gave us money for that, and it's worked. But just a question, and it's probably a little bizarre, but have there been any studies at looking at alternative means of transportation that wouldn't involve the infrastructure costs that would have to go in for more roads and things like that? And also, I know Chicago's connected. I have to go up to Barrington a couple of times a year. I went to Sugar Grove about 3 times in the last week, and the north-south roads are pretty good, but a lot of the travel, everything here was built originally to go from west to east. Well, now people are going more north to south, and that's probably going to be more of the future. But alternative means like, I'm not going to say the craziest idea of it, but even like, and it would have to be subsidized by money that's going into highway expansion, but like a hydrofoil down the canal by us or up the lake, where you don't have to build the roads for it, and then subsidizing the vehicles that are used for it. There's not going to be the traffic delays. The pollution is going to be less. The speed is going to be faster. But alternative means where you can go to the state and say, hey, we don't need more money. We want to just shift the funding into a different way of doing it.
I think Wendella Boats would love that idea because don't they run the I think the water taxis
they work down here.
Work down here. I think pretty well. It's not a crazy idea.
The other one was, but the other one might be more effective. But yeah. But ways of looking, and I don't know if other cities do that. I don't honestly know. But I know people in Los Angeles and unfortunately that's how Kobe Bryant died, but private people will have helicopter investments, but if there was investments in something like that where the infrastructure cost would be a lot less, cut down on the pollution, but just see if it could be funded, like if someone can pay a fee that's helped to be funded by some of the money that would go into building more highways.
Mayors, we're starting our long-range transportation plan again soon. We
Yeah,
need to have all of these conversations about how do we want all of our modes to be moving. Now, I'm dead serious. Like we need to have conversations like this as we think about what do we want our full vision to be. So I look forward to you being part of those conversations again.
Karen?
Yeah, I just wanted to make two final comments. And to your point, Mayor Kukler, personally, as a CMAP board member, I hope and would seriously prefer that if we're making a recommendation to the state legislature, we are giving them a menu of funding options and not specifically saying we're recommending this plan with these funding options where they're costed out, which you've done a good job, this will do this. I feel like, just like you do, having run a home rule referendum in my town, which was a sales tax increase, at the local level, that's the stuff we're made of. We have our own little issues to face where we cut, and that the job of the state legislature is to make those decisions on a statewide basis and not ask us to do that as well. That's their job. So I really feel like that should come as a recommendation and they get to decide what they want to do. Secondly, I really think given the discussion on, what you're seeing with your parking lots, what I see with mine, where we see Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday being the big commuter days, that a recommendation that needs to go with this report is this is a snapshot shot at a point in time. We are 2 years past, or however long past the pandemic we want to say, but that if nothing else, before any of those or some of those transformational changes are made, there needs to be an ongoing monitoring of what the heck is happening. So the lawyers that I know are coming to the office maybe 3 days a week, or they're now saying 4, everybody here Thursday, they're reducing their footprint. A lot of different things are happening down here. And so for the viability of the city too, this is incredibly important that this ends up working out. Are people going to return to the office? Are they going to stay? You've started to see that drift back. So 2 years from now, it could be a very different scenario. So I don't know where we're going to fit that into the report, but I seriously think there has to be something like warning. This is good now or today, but.
Well, and I agree. I think it's not necessarily COVID related any longer. It's technology related. And who would have thought 10 years ago that pretty much, a middle class, single family home would have the technology where you could work from home. But here it is. And I think, in my opinion, I think it's only going to expand more. Like I said, I know, these lawyers are seriously thinking about, we don't need these 4 floors anymore. Maybe we need 2. That can't be the only law firm in the city that has their employees working from home. I'm guessing it could become the norm.
Yeah, and I think that's what we've been talking about, like the fare box recovery ratio has been a obstacle for us in order to innovate when things change. And so part of where you're going to see it in the report is one in that we need to have performance metrics that make sense. So that as we move forward, that we're able to innovate and change depending on what we're seeing. Because 2 years from now, 5 years from now, we may have different needs that are coming up. So we want to make sure that we don't have things on statute that don't match the innovation that are going forward. And that we give that regional entity or the service boards the ability to change as things go forward. You know, every 5 years, let's reassess the strategic plan. Does it make sense with what we know now? Because things are ever changing right now for all of us. So I think that we're trying to build that in to the report because it may well be different 5 years from now, 10 years now, et cetera.
Well, I guess I would like to thank Laura and Aaron today for kind of leading us in this conversation. This has been one of the more fruitful conversations I think I've experienced in the many years I've been coming in here. I mean, I really appreciate the good thoughts that everybody's saying, and everybody from various regions had their say and got some moments here to express what was going on. So, I mean, this is a big package that you're dealing with. And I mean, it sounds like it's an ever changing one, where there's not anything that's going to be the same today, 2 years from now. So, I mean, it's going to be very challenging to kind of move this thing along, and hopefully with your leadership and CMAT's leadership, we'll be able to get the right things on the table to talk about. So thank you.
Thank you.
So moving then, we're going to go to the legislative update from John Carpenter.
Yes.
Hey, John.
I don't think that's John.
Maybe this is a message that the legislature's not doing anything.
Oh, no? Okay, thank you. I'll pitch it for John today. Hi, everyone. Kasha Hart with our
Your mic on?
Can you hear me? Better? Okay, I'll speak up. We don't have too much to report since, you know, it's just been a month since we last provided an update to the group. Really, a lot of our time has been spent supporting some of the legislative engagement on the PART report, and I think that's going to continue to be a big chunk of our time moving forward. Just a couple of notes, though. You know, since we last convened, the governor has signed a number of bills into law. Several of those we discussed at our last meeting, so that includes House Bill 1342, which is that transit omnibus bill, and then House Bill 2068, which requires certain employers to provide pre-tax transit benefits to their employees. On Friday, the governor also issued a couple of vetoes, including a mandatory veto of House Bill 2878. So that's the procurement omnibus that we talked about last meeting that makes several changes to the Public-Private Partnerships for Transportation Act. He changed the definition of a responsible public entity to only include IDOT and tollway. So a little bit of a change there. I think, you know, last time we talked about how the MPO language was removed from that act. So we're kind of rethinking what our strategy may be for veto session now, given that change. Lastly, you know, just following up on the discussion that was had at this meeting last month on safety issues, I do just want to make note that we are going to regroup internally and talk about what's a strategy that we can employ in order to get some more information and resources to the legislature on that topic, since we know it's top of mind for our region. And I think it's important to keep moving that conversation forward. So stay tuned for more on that. That's all for the legislative team. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions? I just got a couple of things I'd like to ask that the legislative group do here. Number one, could you, in future reports, give us an update as to, is there any conversation going on in Springfield about the motor fuel tax, specifically as it applies to electric vehicles? And the other one that's kind of a hot topic, at least out by me, is the governor's veto of the nuclear reactor. And there's a lot of folks that had that one in their eyesight as something that could be a big job generator. But yesterday I got called by a newspaper and wanted to ask me my opinion of whether or not the governor's veto of this would have any future impacts on the electric vehicle. Because if suddenly you start having all these electric vehicles in the region 10 years from now, let's say, and everybody's going home at night and plugging those things into their garage and generating a whole bunch of additional need for electricity, shouldn't we now not be talking about building a couple of those in the region? And I know Senator Resin from Morris is leading the movement to try to overturn it. And she's got, you know, Morris and Braidwood, and she doesn't have Byron, but I mean, those are the three that are seemingly providing much of the power for the area. And those in the know at least tell me that they think that this electricity thing could be a big thing in transportation in the days ahead, which I think it is. And that we as a state should be taking some steps to plan for it instead of, you know, kind of shutting the door on it. So I'm just throwing that out there so everybody knows. I think there may be some newspaper stories. I may get quoted in one of these papers. Sometimes I get myself in a lot of trouble when I do, but whatever. But anyway, thank you for your good efforts. Appreciate it. And if you would keep those things kind of in focus so you can report in the future where you think the conversations in Springfield are going, it would be nice.
Yeah, happy to include that in updates moving forward, and appreciate you drawing the connections between those two issues too. So we'll make sure to include that.
All right, very good.
Yeah.
Okay, moving to 3.3 is the CMAP, CRP, TAP, L, and STP shared fund programs, and Doug Ferguson's going to talk to us.
Good morning. You may remember at your last meeting last month, I presented a summary of the draft recommended programs for the STP Shared Fund, CMAQ Carbon Reduction, and TAP programs. Those were released for a public comment period, which ended last Friday, August 11th. We received one comment, and it was from the Village of Berkeley in support of the recommended CMAQ and CRP programs. So based upon that comment and the lack thereof of comments, staff does not intend to make any recommended changes to the draft programs that will be presented in 2 weeks' time to the project selection committees for STP and then CMAQ and TAP. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions you may have on the draft programs.
Any questions? Well, thank you for your good report. Nice and precise. All right. Let's see, I'm following my agenda. Next is public comment. This is an opportunity for members in the audience to offer comments. Staff did not receive any public comments prior to today's meeting. Do we have any?
No, Mary just checked and there are none.
Okay.
Okay.
Would you give us your name, please? And if you'd use the mic.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak briefly. This was actually inspired by the conversation we were having about the paratransit issues in our local communities. It's a subject I actually have studied during my master's program in transportation planning. And I wanted to share with the council that there actually have been successes about moving residents towards fixed route transit services that are more cost effective than paratransit services when there are additional infrastructure improvements to the community, such as bus stops with shelters, complete sidewalk improvements. And this is something that Salt Lake City studied and found that they had a marked increase in the more cost-effective fixed transit usage that's available out there. And this is something that us as planning liaisons can assist with your communities in terms of applying for programs to help make your communities more capable of allowing your residents to, remain in place and grow and continue to age in their communities while still maintaining access to your larger neighborhoods around them. So wanted to provide that information and research that's out there that can help, that also meshes well with the funding programs that are currently in place through the various regional funding structures. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. We don't have any virtual attendees?
That wanted to comment. No.
No, okay. Seeing and hearing no other comments, next meeting, our next meeting will be November 7th, 2023, where we will be discussing the approval of the UWP items for the continued service of the Planning Liaison Program for our councils. The meeting will be held here at the CMAP offices in the old post office. Please mark your date on your calendar and plan to attend to make sure we have the quorum. And anybody else have any final comments about to adjourn this or otherwise? So I guess I will go, do we vote on it?
You can, just a verbal vote to adjourn.
Second. Motion second, all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.